The first laugh came from my own daughter. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel on the surface. Just a soft, dismissive chuckle as I walked into the conference room with my cane tapping against the marble floor. My son-in-law leaned closer to her and whispered, "Is he really going to sit through this?" But then something shifted. The company secretary froze mid-sentence. A pen slipped from her hand, and the man at the head of the table, the chairman, slowly stood up. His face drained of color. "No," he whispered. "Not him." Every single eye in that room turned toward me. They thought I was an aging burden, a name on paper, a problem to be managed. They had no idea they'd just summoned the man who once shut down billion-dollar empires with a single sentence. "My name is Elliot Graves. I am 71 years old. And for the last 5 years, my own family worked very hard to forget who I was. It started quietly. That's how disrespect always begins. Sunday brunch at my daughter Lauren's penthouse in Toronto. Glass walls. Lakeview. Furniture so expensive it felt afraid of being used. They spoke around me. Not to me. Lauren was scrolling her phone. Her husband, Mark, talked numbers. "The Singapore expansion is locked," he said. "If Dad signs off, we're done." "Dad." That was me. Lauren glanced my way, annoyed. "Just don't overwhelm him. You know how he gets." I smiled politely and stirred my cold tea. I used to argue constitutional cases before the Supreme Court. Now my own child thought I couldn't handle conversation. My grandson Noah, 13 years old, looked at me. "Grandpa, can you help me prepare for my moot court tryouts?" Before I could answer, Mark waved his hand. "He'll forget halfway through, buddy. Let's ask your tutor." They laughed. I didn't. I said nothing, and that was my first mistake. 2 days later, Mark showed up at my townhouse with a gift basket and fake warmth. "Dad," he said, sitting far too close. "We need a small favor." I already knew what was coming. "Our holding company needs liquidity. Temporary. Just until Q4. He slid a folder toward me. 700,000. I closed it. "No." Lauren's smile disappeared instantly. "You don't even understand what you're saying no to," she snapped. "You're retired. You don't need that money." "I understand perfectly," I replied calmly. "That money is for my care and my grandson's future." Mark stood up. "You're being selfish," he said coldly. "You live off family. The least you can do is contribute." Contribute. Like I hadn't built everything they stood on. 3 weeks later, I collapsed in my kitchen. Dizziness. Slurred speech. A stroke scare. I called Lauren. Straight to voicemail. I called Mark. He texted back. "Call emergency services. We're in a meeting." I lay on the floor for 12 minutes before dialing 911. At the hospital, the doctor said something that stuck with me. "You're lucky you called. Another half hour could have changed everything." When I got home, I found the envelope. Application for guardianship. Filed by my own daughter. Claiming cognitive decline. Financial incompetence. Risk to myself. Attached was a medical evaluation from a doctor I had never met. That's when something inside me finally snapped awake. They assumed I was finished. They were wrong. They didn't know that before retirement, I wasn't Elliot the grandpa. I was Justice Elliot Graves, federal appellate judge, the man who dismantled corporate monopolies and rewrote compliance law in Canada. They didn't know my retirement was strategic, not surrender, and they definitely didn't know about the secure office hidden behind my wine cellar. I made one phone call. "Amelia," I said, "I need you back in the game." Silence. Then, "Sir?" "Yes, it's me." She was on a plane within hours. Amelia Cross had once been my clerk. Now she ran one of the sharpest litigation teams in the country. She reviewed the medical report. "This doctor," she said slowly, "lost his license 3 years ago." She looked up. And guess who paid his outstanding lawsuits? Mark's company. They hadn't just crossed a line. They'd documented the crime. The hearing was set for Friday. Family court. Lauren looked confident. Mark looked smug. Their lawyer smiled like this was already over. Then I walked in. Not with a cane. With posture. The judge entered. And stopped. "Justice Graves." Her voice shook. I nodded politely. The room changed temperature. Their case collapsed in 20 minutes. Fake doctor. Financial coercion. Documented neglect during medical emergency. Then Amelia stood and placed one final document on the table. "What's this?" Mark asked. "That," Amelia said calmly, "is notice that Mr. Graves has acquired your company's outstanding debt." Mark laughed, until the judge explained what that meant. They didn't just lose the case. They lost everything. 3 months later, I visited my grandson's moot court competition. He won. Lauren never showed up. I sat in the front row, clapping. Scene. I am 71 years old. I learned that silence is not dignity when it protects abuse. That family doesn't mean access. And that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stop enabling people who mistake your patience for weakness. Respect is not inherited. It is enforced. The silence inside the courtroom was unnatural. Not the kind of silence born from respect, but the kind that follows fear. The moment the judge spoke my name, Justice Elliot Graves, the color drained from Lauren's face. Mark gripped the arm of his chair. His hands were shaking. That was the moment they realized. They were not facing an ordinary old man, but the consequences of their own arrogance. The judge closed the file and asked plainly, "Do the petitioners truly maintain that this man is incapable of making his own decisions?" Lauren's lawyer stood, struggling to sound confident. "Yes, Your Honor. Our concern is solely for his health." I asked to speak. "May I?" The judge responded immediately. "Of course, Justice Graves." Mark flinched. Until that moment, he still believed I was merely a defendant. He hadn't understood that I was still a voice. This court respected. I rose slowly. "I am not here to prove my sanity," I said calmly. "I am here to show why this petition was filed." Amelia stood beside me. "With the court's permission, we intend to present evidence that this application is part of a deliberate financial scheme." A murmur rippled through the room. The first witness was the so-called doctor, a man I had never met, yet one who had signed away my autonomy on paper. Amelia asked directly, "Isn't it true that your medical license was revoked 3 years ago?" He hesitated. "And isn't it also true that your personal legal debts were paid by a company owned by Mark?" Silence. Then, barely audible, "Yes." The judge removed her glasses. "So you knowingly provided unauthorized medical testimony to this court?" At that moment, court officers stepped forward. The man didn't even make it out of the witness chair. Mark stood abruptly. "This is irrelevant," he shouted. "My father-in-law is not well." I looked at him. For the first time, he couldn't meet my eyes. Amelia presented the next evidence. Bank statements. Transaction records. "This money," she said, pointing to the document, "was not withdrawn from Mr. Graves' personal account, but from a charitable foundation, established in his late wife's name." The judge's expression hardened. "For what purpose?" Amelia answered. "To finance this very petition. Legal fees, fraudulent reports, and payments to shell companies." Lauren's eyes filled with tears, not from remorse, but from exposure. The judge did not reserve her decision. She did what judges do. When the truth is undeniable, the application is dismissed, she ruled. And the court orders a formal investigation into financial abuse of a senior citizen. Mark looked as if his legs might give way. But the final blow had yet to fall. I stepped forward with one last document. "Your Honor, this is a notice of default regarding the petitioner's company debt." The judge read it, then looked up at me. "You are the holder of this debt?" I nodded. As of today, the courtroom fell completely silent. Mark's world ended in that moment. Weeks later, his company was dissolved. Lauren tried to contact me. I did not respond. I had learned that not every relationship deserves access. I am still 71 years old, but I am no longer invisible. I helped my grandson prepare for his first public argument. I placed my late wife's foundation into responsible hands, and I retired once again, this time with dignity. This story is not about revenge. It is about balance. And balance must always be restored. Power doesn't vanish quietly. It resists. It claws. And when it knows it's losing, it reveals its ugliest face. Mark didn't go down with dignity. 2 days after the court ruling, my phone rang. Unknown number. I already knew who it was. "Please," Lauren said, her voice shaking. "He's losing everything. The investigation, the debt, the company. It's destroying him." I stayed silent. "You don't understand," she continued desperately. "He's under pressure. He made mistakes." I finally spoke. "No," I said calmly. "He made choices." The line went dead. The investigation moved fast. Too fast for anyone to interfere. Accounts were frozen. Properties seized. Emails uncovered. Messages that showed planning, intent, and greed. The foundation in my wife's name had been treated like a personal wallet. That alone carried consequences. Mark was arrested quietly. No cameras. No headlines. just the sound of metal doors closing, a sound I knew all too well. A week later, I visited him, not out of anger, out of closure. He sat across from me, smaller than I remembered. No confidence, no rehearsed speeches. "You won," he said bitterly. I shook my head. This was never a game. He laughed once. A hollow sound. "You could have stopped this." "Yes," I replied. "And you could have never started it." That was the last conversation we ever had. Lauren didn't attend the sentencing. She sent a letter instead. Not an apology. An explanation. I didn't keep it. Some words don't deserve permanence. Life became quiet again. But this time, it wasn't an empty quiet. I returned to my routine. Morning walks. Old books. Long conversations with my grandson. He asked me once, "Grandfather, weren't you afraid to fight them?" I smiled. "I wasn't fighting them," I said. "I was standing up for myself." The world often believes age makes you weak. That silence means surrender. That kindness equals blindness. They were wrong. I didn't destroy my family. They tried to destroy me. And failed. I simply refused to disappear. Final thought. Justice doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes slowly. With patience, truth, and the courage to speak when everyone expects you to stay silent.